All right, wonderful. It's a good day today. Let us continue looking at a very simple topic, which is trigonometry. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to be looking at a very simple concept, which is actually the graph of sine and cosine and tangent functions. So these are the concepts that we are going to be looking at: the cos, and tangent graphs, in other ways. So to begin with, we need to understand certain concepts that will guide us on how to draw the sine graph and the cosine graph. So the first thing that we should take note of are the following concerning the sine and the cosine graphs. What should you know before you draw the graph of these two functions? Number one, the sine and cosine graph have a wave shape. Okay, have a what? A wave shape. So meaning it's supposed to be a wave shape, the sine and the cosine. The sine and cosine graph have a minimum value of -1, meaning minimum value of -1. We know when talk of a graph, we are simply talking of y-axis and x-axis. So on the y-axis, the minimum value should be on the y-axis, negative axis, the minimum value should be -1. And the maximum value on the positive axis is 1. The sine and cosine has an amplitude of 1. So because we say that the sine and cosine have a minimum value of -1 and maximum value of 1, hence we say that the sine and cosine has an amplitude of 1. Instead of saying minimum value, we just say amplitude of 1. The amplitude can be greater than or less than 1. Now, what is amplitude? Amplitude simply means half the distance between the highest and the lowest point of a wave. So half the distance between the lowest and the highest point of the wave. Now, the sine and cosine graphs complete a full cycle in 360 degrees. So for the graph to be complete, it has to move up to have a wave of about 360 degrees. Hence, because of this, we don't say the full cycle. We say the sine and cosine graphs have a period. Instead of saying a full cycle, we say has a period of 360. So periods differ. It can be a period of 180 or 360. So in this lesson, mostly we are going to focus on 360 as our period. Okay, so with this knowledge now, we need to be able to sketch. How can we sketch the sine and the graph with this knowledge? So let us use the graph. Okay, I'll just use the graph in this case with the knowledge. So I'll get my graph paper here, where we have to answer now the following questions. Okay, so we are simply saying we need to, so the graph, so let's see. So we are going to draw, we are going to use, you can see, I'm sure you can see these my lines, so I don't need to draw the lines. I'll just use the same, since the graph is already divided. So we are going to say the sine graph. Let's say the sine, not this sine, but the sine graph. Okay, the sine graph. How does the sine graph look like? So the sine graph, when we are given a situation of y is equal to sine theta, how does this graph look like? Y is equal to sine theta. So this graph simply looks like this, because we are told that it has the maximum value and the minimum value of 1, minimum value of -1. We're going to say this will be my 1 here, this will be my 1, and I'll move along. I'll say this will be my 0 here, this will be my 0, and I have -1 using 2 centimeter. Then, so in this case, we are simply saying that this will be my y-axis, and on the x-axis now, this is where we see the periods from. This is where the periods will matter. So they are saying that the periods should be from 0 degrees to 360. That makes it a full period, meaning a full cycle. So we are saying this is 90, is going to be from 0 we move on to 90 degrees. From 90 we move on to 180 degrees. From 180 we move on to 270 degrees. From 270 we have 360 degrees, and this is our x-axis. Okay, this is our x-axis. Okay, so now that we have completed the graph like this, then we can just show this, we can sketch. So the sketching is very simple. The sine graph will always start from the origin, from where 0 is. That's where the sine graph will always start from. So this should be well known. So we are starting from 0, going all the way to 360. So let's put the dot. It's supposed to move from 0 to 90, and the maximum we should not reach, it should not go beyond 1, because we are saying the maximum value here is 1. So 0 to 90, we put a dot there. And then from 0 to 90, it's supposed to go all the way to 80, to 180 degrees. From 180, it should go all the way to 270. Then from 270, it is going to 360. Then we have a full circle. So now let us try to draw this nicely. So we are simply going to draw it nicely. The curve will look like this. From there, we connect these points. Connect so you can be flexible and rotate this. Okay, we connect. Make sure you don't make corner. A curve does not have a corner. A curve should be a curve without a corner. Okay, so this is the curve that will formulate. Okay, so this is the curve for sine function. So every sine function, when y is equal to sine theta, this is a graph that you are expected to draw. It simply means that it starts from 0 and it goes all the way from 0, 90, 180, 270 and 360. Hence it has made a full cycle, a period of 360 degrees. So this is how a sine graph looks like. Now let us look at this cosine. Okay, let us look at this cosine graph. The cosine graph. Now, the cosine graph and the sine have the same conditions. They only differ on how they look like. So here we are also doing y is equal to cos theta. How do we sketch this graph? Y is equal to cos theta. So we are going to do the same. We have the maximum value to be 1. So let's write maximum value to be 1. Then we have our 0 here. Then we have -1 there. And then we can say we have 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, and 360 degrees. Okay, so this will be our x-axis. Now, with this now diagram, we are going to do the following. Okay, so the following will be, since now we know, one thing I forgot to mention, you see this this sine graph, since we are just saying that a period of 360, the period can go beyond. So meaning this graph will continue going, it will continue going until whatever period that we have been asked. So just know that this is not the end. It can also go this side just like that and make a complete wave as well of 360. So the sine graph, now we come to this one. We are simply saying, the cosine graph, I mean, since we know that this is a period of 360, the sine graph starts at the origin, but the cosine graph does not start at the origin. The cosine graph always starts from 1, then it goes through all the periods. So it will start from 1 there, then it goes to 90, from 90, 180, from 180 it goes back to 270, from 270 it goes back to 360, making a full cycle, a full period. Now, How do we sketch? Let's sketch it. We just continue connecting these points just like that. Nicely. Make sure you don't make caves. Caves are not, you don't make corners. It's supposed to be a cave. Okay. All right. I've tried. Okay. So this is how the cosine graph will look like. So the cosine graph will look like this, meaning that it has made a full period of 360 degrees. As you can see, it's a full period of 360 degrees. So when they tell you in your exam, sketch the following graph, y is equal to cos theta, this is what you should do. When they say sketch the following graph, y is equal to sine theta, this is how the graph look like. Okay, this is how it looks like. So just make sure that you memorize these graphs, know how they should be, and therefore now you are not going to have a problem. So now let's look at another graph, which is the tan. The tan graph. So we are going to look at the tangent graph, but for now, hopefully I've made these two graphs simple and simpler to you. If you have any question, please comment on on the comment box, and I'll be able to respond to those questions. Make sure you memorize these graphs, know how they look like, so that when a question comes in your exam of sketching these graphs, you should easily sketch them without any problem. Tangent graph. Now, what are the conditions that you need to know in order for you to understand the tangent graph? Number one, the tangent graph does not have a minimum value or a maximum value. That's one thing you should know. It's different from the sine and the cosine graph. The tangent graph does not have a minimum or maximum value. The tangent graph is undefined, meaning that it is undefined where x is equal to 0, x is equal to 90, and x is equal to 270. This is true. You can prove it using your calculator. Just try to say, what is tan 90 degrees? You are going to have math error. Or you can say tan 270 degrees. You are going to have math error. This is why we are saying that it is undefined. Okay. The tangent graph completes a full cycle in 180 degrees. So a full cycle in the tangent graph is 180. It's different from the sine, which was the full cycle, or the amplitude is 360.
And the period of 360
so the tangent graph has a period of 180. The period in the sine and the cosine was 360, but for tangent, the period is 180 degrees. So how does the graph now look like? How does it look like, the graph for tangent? Okay, let's try to draw the graph for the tangent. So we are going to just label the minimum values to be 1 and -1, 0. But we have the period of 180. We are going to have two period, which is all the way to 360. So we have 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and 360 degrees. Okay, so we have these values inserted there. So all we need to do is to sketch now. All we need to do is to sketch by simply saying, here we are trying to find the tan. Okay, this is you can say it's the tan graph. Okay, the tan graph where we are simply saying y is equal to tan theta. Where we are saying y is simply equal to tan theta. How will the graph look like? So the graph for a tan will always, since we know that the 90 is undefined, meaning that the graph will start from 0 like the sine graph, but it will not reach 90 degrees. It will just be close to 90 degrees at this amplitude. So this means that there will be asymptotes. Okay, so meaning that tan will be there. It will not reach exactly 90, but it will be just close to 90, which we sometimes call asymptote, meaning a straight line to which graph is drawn closer and closer without ever touching the line of 90 degrees. Those are asymptotes. Then we have that point, and then we have another point. Now we are going to have it from 180 degrees. So from 180, it will move closer to negative side, which is here, but it will not reach 90, and it also move closer to this point, which is there. Okay, we are plotting them. And then 270 is undefined. So this line, we will not draw anything on this line because the tangent graph does not touch 270 line and does not touch 90 degrees line. But it does touch 360. So from 360 here, we are going to move closer to 270 just there. So this is 2 periods. Okay, so when we try to graph it now, we'll start from 0 here and just show a graph moving there to there. You can see that this is not touching this line. Again, from here is a curve. By the way, it's supposed to be a curve, not a straight line. It's supposed to be a curve. So this is a curve, it's not a straight line. Then we have again this other side. We have a curve which will come like that. Okay. Oops, it has touched the point there. It's not supposed to touch the point. It's not supposed to touch the y-axis. So don't do this. Once you do this, it will be wrong. It's not supposed to touch the y-axis. So it will just end there. I mean the 90 degrees angle. It just ends there. Okay. Then we move on again to this other side, starting from there to that point. This is a graph. Okay, it's a curve-like shape. Let me just make a curve so that you don't get confused. Okay, so this is a curve. It's supposed to be a curve which is like this. Okay, see that? Also this one, let's make it to be a curve so that you see it clearly. This is also a curve okay, like this. So this is exactly how the tan graph looks like. Okay, the tan graph looks like this, where we have a line which is a 90 degrees. The graph does not touch this line because it's undefined, and we have another line which is here. This is also undefined, so we don't touch this part. Hopefully I've made this clear. So this graph, you just have to master it. Okay, you just have to master it and know that the tan graph look like this, and the sine and the cosine graphs looks like this. Okay, this is a sine graph, and this is the cosine graph. So these, you are just supposed to master these concepts, because in your exam they will bring a question, sketch the graph y is equal to sine theta. You should not fail to sketch the graph y is equal to sine theta.